Miss Dior, you probably know this fragrance. But do you know the story of the woman who inspired it? Catherine Dior, the sister of the legendary designer? For a long time, she remained in the shadow of her brilliant brother. Her life was far from couture and camera flashes. It was filled with struggle and pain. This woman survived torture and a concentration camp, and still managed to keep her faith in people and continue bringing beauty into the world. This is a story about love, about resilience, about the sacred bond between siblings, and about a woman whose will to live could not be broken. Catherine and Christian Dior were born into a large family of the industrialist Maurice Dior, who made his fortune in fertilizers. This is an important detail to remember because the lives of our two protagonists would always be closely connected to flowers. From childhood, brother and sister especially adored roses, and their mother's garden overflowing with them, and they adored each other's company. But in 1931, the family's happy world shattered. Their mother Madeleine passed away, their father's business collapsed, and the Dior family lost their home. Brother and sister decided to leave and try to conquer Paris. Even then, it was clear that young Christian Dior possessed a special talent for drawing and fashion design. And where else in the world but Paris could one dream of creating fashion? Catherine found work in a glove and hat shop, and at the same time became her brother's very first model, trying on his still unknown designs. But in 1939, the life they had been building brick by brick collapsed once again. The Second World War began. It was then that Catherine's life changed forever. She met Hervé de Charbonneries, a passionate member of the French resistance. Despite the fact that he was married, had 3 children, and was more than 10 years older than her, Catherine fell in love with him and soon joined the resistance herself. I have often heard criticism directed at Catherine for this choice. Some say she was a homewrecker, that everything that later happened to her was karma. But I believe we should be asking more questions of the man. Hervé was the one who had made vows at the altar. He was the older, experienced one in that relationship. Catherine was only 22 at the time. Catherine was given the secret name Caro and began gathering information about the movements of German troops. She made long bicycle journeys to meet informants, carried secret messages, and her brother's apartment in Paris became one of the resistance safe houses. This undercover work was extremely dangerous. Out of roughly 2,000 agents, about 900 were arrested, deported, and ultimately killed. The same fate struck Catherine's group. The Nazis planted an informant who exposed the names of its members. On July 6, 1944, Catherine Dior was arrested, along with the other members of her resistance network. It happened only a few weeks before Paris was liberated. She was subjected to brutal interrogations by the Gestapo, who sought to extract the names of other resistance members. But even in the most horrific moments, she did not betray a single person. One of the preferred torture methods of Gestapo officer Berger was to submerge victims in icy water for hours, bringing them to the brink of death and then reviving them only to begin again. Women were also subjected to sexual violence. Yet nothing could break her. She rarely spoke about those months. Later, in an interview, she said only, "I told them as many lies as I could." Unbroken, Catherine was first sent to prison and then deported to the women's concentration camp of Ravensbrück. There, she was no longer Catherine Dior. She was prisoner number 57,813. Like every concentration camp, Ravensbrück was hell on earth. During the war, around 130,000 women passed through it. Nearly 90,000 did not survive. And yet, even in those horrific conditions, Catherine held on to her dignity. She once said that no matter how hungry she was, she would never fall to the ground to pick up food thrown by an SS guard. It may seem like a small act, but it was not. It was resistance. Over the course of a single year, she was transferred through several camps, Torgau, Abteroda, and finally Markkleeberg in 1945. There, she was subjected to brutal industrial work, handling chemical barrels with her bare hands. In April 1945, As the Nazis retreated before the advancing Soviet army, prisoners were forced onto death marches. Catherine managed to escape. She hid in Dresden and miraculously survived the bombings. Of everything she witnessed that year, she preferred never to speak. A fellow survivor, Zahavishash Stessel, later said of her, "She did not want to be pitied. She was the mistress of her own soul." Christian desperately tried to free his sister, reaching out to every influential connection he had. But he could do nothing. The last news he received in 1945 was that Catherine's name appeared on an execution list. He no longer expected to see her alive. So, when he finally received word that she had survived and was arriving in Paris, he rushed to the train station to meet her. He waited anxiously, but when the train arrived, he could not recognize her in the crowd. In front of him stood the ghost of a woman, skin stretched tightly over her bones, hollow eyes. At 27, she looked more like the dead than the living. When they returned to Christian's apartment, he wanted to celebrate her return. He prepared her favorite dish, cheese soufflé. But she could not eat. It would take months before Catherine could eat normal food again. She suffered from severe trauma. For a long time, she could not sleep properly, could not eat without pain. But the love of her brother and her reunion with Hervé slowly helped her return to life. And she found salvation in what had once warmed her soul as a child: flowers. She began selling flowers grown in Provence to florists in Paris, waking every morning at 4 o'clock. By then, Christian had opened his legendary house of Dior in Paris and had begun creating perfumes. His first fragrance was composed of roses and jasmine, Catherine's favourite flowers. There is a legend that when the perfume was finally ready, Christian was sitting with his team, thinking about what to call it. At that very moment, Catherine entered the room, and someone exclaimed, "Oh, Miss Dior!" And so the name of the iconic fragrance was born. Hervé's grandchildren later recalled that Catherine wore that perfume for the rest of her life. So, if you ever see Miss Dior on a store shelf, don't just pass it by. And if you already wear it, now you know the extraordinary woman whose story is forever connected to that name. In 1952, investigations began into the crimes committed in that very Gestapo headquarters where she had been tortured. Catherine found the strength to testify. She agreed to be a witness. She stood face to face with the men who had tortured her, and in court, she called them what they were: bastards. For her bravery, Catherine was awarded several medals, including the Legion of Honor, the Croix de Guerre, the Combatant's Cross, and the King's Medal for Courage in the Cause of Freedom. And yet, the award she treasured most was not one of these official decorations. It was a simple gold bracelet from the Franco-Polish Resistance Network, engraved with the dates of her arrest and her liberation. She wore it every single day. After the sudden death of her brother in 1957, Catherine devoted herself to preserving his memory. She cared for the family home that had once been lost, and later repurchased and turned into a museum, and she continued working with flowers. Until the very last day of her life, she worked in her garden. Catherine Dior passed away in 2008 at the age of 91. Catherine's story is a story of extraordinary strength of spirit, of resilience, of the quiet dignity of a woman who refused to be broken. It is a reminder that even on ashes, flowers can bloom again. In the famous Miss Dior commercial, Natalie Portman asks,
"What would you do for love?"
And I believe Catherine Dior answered that question with her entire life. Now I want to ask you the same. What would you do for love?